On today's podcast, we're going to be discussing being ready every day and not just when issues arise. So stay tuned. Welcome to Warehouse Safety Tips. You can find the show notes to each episode, links to information mentioned on the podcast, the social media platforms we're on, and anything else related to the podcast at warehousesafetytips.com. Now, if you're a seasoned podcast listener, this podcast is going to be different from most you listen to. It's based around exactly what the name implies, warehouse safety tips. And since the people in this industry are busy, we know that time is money and each episode will be as short and to the point as possible. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get to the podcast. At the time of this podcast, the world is experiencing something unlike anything most of us have ever experienced before. The experience is the coronavirus. Now, you might be thinking, we have viruses and other situations that grip our nation and the world all the time, but not quite like this. The closings, up and downs of the stock market, blanketed media coverage, and overall fears and concerns with this one is definitely way above average. So what does a current topic have to do with this podcast? The answer comes in the form of a quote by Charles Caleb Colton. Mr. Colton said that the true measure of your character is what you do when nobody is watching. And this is the quote that will make or break how easy it is for you to do a certain thing or not. Before moving on, here's a word from one of our sponsors. If you've ever been to or worked in a warehouse, you know just how important safety is to both management and staff. It's almost impossible to go 10 steps without seeing safety tape, angles, signs, and/or safety products. It's these items that show us how to be safe and avoid danger in the workplace. And if you're looking for the best products to make this happen, look no further than Mighty Line. Mighty Line floor signs and floor markings offer the best industrial products out there. We're proud to have Mighty Line as the official floor sign and floor marking company for the Warehouse Safety Tips podcast and site. Go to mightylinetape.com/safety tips to request a sample pack of their incredible safety signs and floor markings. Now back to the podcast. In the first part of our podcast, I said the quote, "The true measure of one's character is what you do when nobody is watching," and it's very applicable to how you'll figure things out overall. What I mean by this is, in the case of the before mentioned virus, we're being told to wash our hands. They say everything you've ever needed to know you learned in kindergarten. If that in fact is the truth, you probably already know that you should be washing your hands on the regular. But it's at the end of the quote, "when nobody is watching," that'll trip people up. Again, you might be asking yourself, what does that have to do with this podcast? Well, let's substitute washing our hands for always stopping at a designated safety floor marking, looking for lift trucks, and then proceeding. Always wearing safety glasses, hearing protection, or hard hats, and never behaving in an unsafe manner around machinery. You may be able to say that you almost always do these things around management, but can you say the same thing for when nobody's watching? Don't start obeying rules and regulations because you're afraid of getting in trouble with management, somebody was injured or killed, or during a special time. Do it every day and all the time. Not because of the above, but because you value you and hopefully you and your fellow staff and facility. That's a safety culture and a true measure of character that'll provide safety, organization, and productivity every day. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Warehouse Safety Tips. If you visit warehousesafetytips.com, you'll find the show notes for this episode and access to all of our blog posts, previous podcasts, advertiser information, and much more. Thank you for listening to Warehouse Safety Tips and have a safe day.